Come with me. You need to see this yourself. That's what the old security guard said, voice low and unsteady, like he hated every syllable coming out of his mouth. I had just finished paying for the bags, groceries, kids' new school clothes, the usual Saturday haul. My wife had stepped a few paces away to take a call, thumb already swiping the screen before she even said excuse me. Nothing unusual. People take calls. Until that moment, it was just another errand. I followed him anyway. My chest felt strangely weighted, the way it does before bad news you haven't named yet. We turned the corner past the fitting rooms, past racks of discounted jeans and summer dresses nobody was buying in October. He nodded toward a small security monitor tucked behind the counter. Live feed, grainy but clear enough. And there she was, my wife. The woman I'd built, 17 years and 2 children with. Leaning against the cinder block wall near the emergency exit, phone to her ear, laughing that soft, private laugh I used to think was reserved for me. Her free hand twirled a strand of hair, the same nervous, happy gesture she'd had since college. Her voice leaked through the thin partition just loud enough. I told him it was the school. He's so easy. I didn't move, didn't breathe loud. The guard glanced at me sideways, waiting for the explosion that never came. I figured you'd want to know, he muttered. I nodded once. My hands stayed steady. I thanked him, quietly, politely, then walked back through the fluorescent aisles, past the cash registers, out to the parking lot. Placed the bags in the trunk like it was any other Saturday. When she finally appeared, still smiling that bright, practiced smile, I leaned in and kissed her forehead. Gentle, routine. She had no idea the countdown had already begun. She slid into the passenger seat, cheeks flushed, eyes bright from whatever conversation she'd just ended. Sorry, she said lightly. School stuff. Parent-teacher nonsense. No problem, I replied. Everything good? Everything's good. She leaned over, pressed a quick kiss to my cheek. Not a flicker of guilt in her voice, not a tremor in her fingers. But something inside me had already cracked open. Not rage, not yet. Just a cold, surgical clarity. That night I lay beside her in the dark, wide awake while she slept. I memorized the rhythm of her breathing. Slow inhale, slight pause, soft exhale. The way she curled one hand under the pillow, cradling her phone like it was a living thing that might escape. 1,000 questions queued up behind my eyes, but I didn't ask a single one. Discipline is what separates reaction from strategy. And discipline, I've learned, makes a man far more dangerous than anger ever could. Hi again, Nolan Chase. 7 years as a military intelligence analyst taught me patterns most civilians never notice. Anomalies, timing gaps, behavioral tells that scream louder than words. Before construction management, before blueprints and concrete, I spent my days hunting inconsistencies in data streams half a world away. Now those same skills turned inward, and my wife, suddenly, was full of them. The gym bag she brought home 3 weeks ago and never unpacked. The volunteer nights that always ran later than they should. The new perfume, floral, expensive, nothing like the citrus vanilla one I'd bought her every Christmas for a decade. The phone she now locked with a passcode she never used before. I said nothing. Instead, I started building. Quietly. A private log on an encrypted drive. Dates, times, excuses, tone shifts, mileage on her car that didn't match the stories. Then, I called in a favor. An old friend, digital forensics consultant, former Marine, the guy whose custody battle I helped untangle years ago with paperwork and patience, owed me. 2 days later, I had everything. Deleted texts, cloud-backed voice memos, geolocation pings. The voice on the recordings wasn't just hers, it was his. And the next file, a photo time-stamped 12 minutes after I'd swiped my card at checkout that Saturday, froze the air in my lungs. She was still inside the store, but she wasn't alone. His hand hovered near hers in the corridor, by the fitting rooms. Not quite touching, but close enough that the space between them felt intimate. What stopped me wasn't the gesture. It was her face, relaxed, lit from within. That subtle half-smile she used to flash me across the breakfast table, before kids, before mortgages. before life poured concrete around every soft edge. That smile now belonged to someone else. I stared at the image longer than any sane man should. I, Nolan Chase again. Learning, in real time, bone deep, what betrayal actually costs. Not the cinematic version with screaming and shattered glass. Just the slow, quiet nausea that settles behind the ribs and never quite leaves. I didn't confront her. I upgraded the plan. First, retained a family law attorney, discreet, methodical, experienced in pre-litigation asset tracing. We built a timeline color-coded, cross-referenced. Next, met our financial advisor over coffee and asked one precise question. If marital funds are being quietly diverted, how soon can we prove it and freeze it? His answer? Depends how clever she thinks she is. Turns out, not very. Small transfers from the joint account to a private debit card, registered under a shell LLC. The LLC name matched his initials. I signed the freeze orders without hesitation. Transferred title protections on the house, using a clause my father insisted on when he co-signed the original loan 20 years ago. She couldn't touch it, couldn't borrow against it. She had no idea yet. But the safety net she thought she'd quietly stolen was already gone. 3 days later, I booked a small conference room downtown. Neutral, professional, forgettable. 2 chairs opposite mine, 1 legal pad, 1 thick manila envelope. She thought we were meeting a potential investor for my next project. He thought he was there to discuss business expansion. Neither knew the meeting was with me. They arrived together, not holding hands, but walking close enough that the lie had grown careless. He wore a navy blazer, trying for casual authority. She wore the perfume I gave her on our last anniversary. I stood as they entered. Her face drained of color in less than a second. He froze like a deer that just heard the safety click off. Sit, I said. They sat. I, Nolan Chase again. No yelling. No envelope hurled across the table like bad television. I simply slid the folder forward. Inside, bank statements, text logs, photos, LLC filings bearing his initials, her digital signature on every transfer. She didn't open it. I can explain, she whispered. I'm not here for explanations, I said evenly. I'm here to end the story. You two began this behind my back. I'm finishing it legally. He leaned forward, voice trying for steady. You have no right to ambush us like this. I let out one short, quiet laugh. You ambushed a marriage. I'm just returning the courtesy. With paperwork. Then I stood. I've already filed for legal separation. The house is frozen. The joint accounts are under fraud review, and you, I looked straight at him, might want to call an attorney before the IRS starts asking questions about shell companies. She was trembling now. Not fear exactly, but the sudden realization that this wasn't a bluff. What neither of them knew, someone else had been watching the entire sequence unfold. My sister Rachel, divorce attorney, single mother, zero patience for betrayal when it touched family, had booked a flight the moment I forwarded her the files. No lectures, just one text. Don't let her control the story. I land Thursday. And she did. Hi, Nolan Chase again. Watching my life burn in slow motion and learning how to stand in the smoke without blinking. By Friday morning, the first shockwaves had already landed. My soon-to-be ex-wife tried damage control, texts to mutual friends, vague narratives about emotional distance and growing apart. No mention of cheating, no mention of fraud, just unhappiness. But I'd already sent the receipts ahead, documents, timestamps, proof. One friend called me directly. Nolan, if even half of this is true, she just nuked her own life. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Rachel arrived with fresh paperwork, emergency orders, accelerated filings, asset protection clauses, preemptive custody outlines in case she tried to weaponize the children. Across the conference table, she looked at me and asked the only question that mattered. Are you doing this for payback or for peace? The words landed hard. This wasn't only about catching them anymore. It was about who I would become on the other side. Peace, I told her. She nodded once. Then let's finish it clean. That evening, my wife showed up at the house she no longer had keys or codes for. New locks, reset alarm, a formal notice taped to the front door. She stood on the porch 10 full minutes under the motion light. Didn't knock, just cried silently into her palms. The security cameras captured every second. That footage would matter more than she ever imagined. Monday morning, her employer, a private healthcare network with a strict ethics clause, received an anonymous package. Receipts showing company travel card used for 2 non-existent training weekends, hotel bookings, timestamps that matched her affair. She didn't just cheat. She committed provable financial misconduct on company time and dime. HR called her in. She tried to spin it as marital retaliation. Policy doesn't care about spin. It cares about evidence. Immediate administrative leave. Investigation pending. Her voicemail to me that night ran 6 minutes. Blame to pleading to long silence to pure rage. You don't get to destroy me just because you're hurt. I didn't reply. I was on the couch with my kids, watching a Pixar movie we hadn't sat through together in months. Popcorn, laughter, steady. For the first time in a long time, the room felt safe. That was the life I would protect, not the illusion I'd lost. The next day, Rachel slid one final file across the table. You ready to see what he's really been hiding? I thought we already had everything. She shook her head. Not this. The pages contained public records from 3 states, court filings, databases, a 4-year-old restraining order filed by another woman against him. Same man, different city, identical patterns, coercion, financial control, emotional abuse, settled quietly out of court, buried, but real, and now uncovered. I, Nolan Chase again. In that moment, I stopped being the man who only wanted peace, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This man had a documented history. One phone call to her HR, not everything, just the public court link, and a polite suggestion they run a background check on the man their suspended employee had been traveling with. 48 hours later, her leave became permanent termination, not only for misuse of funds, but for introducing a documented risk into a patient care environment. She called from a burner number that night. Please, you've done enough, I answered calmly. No, I haven't done anything. I just stopped covering for you. Then I hung up. The man finally texted the next morning. One line. Let's meet, I showed Rachel. He's probing for weakness, she said. Don't give him any. I didn't reply. Instead, I called a former client. Private security, risk mitigation, owed me a favor. Within hours, the man who thought he was simply dating a married woman was served. Legal complaint, cease and desist, tied to financial entanglement and prior conduct. His silence afterward was louder than any apology could have been. One last request came from her. An in-person meeting. She arrived 10 minutes early at the cafe, where we once picked our children's names over coffee and pancakes. No makeup, no rings. Just the woman I married 17 years ago, stripped of every mask she'd worn lately. She looked exhausted, hollow. I know I don't deserve kindness, she said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't think you'd find out, she continued. Not because you're stupid, just because you trusted me too much. I nodded once. Hi, Nolan Chase again. Sitting across from a ghost wearing my wife's face, finally understanding that the deepest betrayal wasn't the affair, the lies, or even the money. It was how effortlessly she gambled our entire life on someone who wouldn't even stand beside her when the walls came down. She reached into her purse and slid a single photo across the table. Our wedding day. You can tear it up. Burn it. I just didn't want to be the only one still looking at it. I stared at the image. 2 young people smiling at forever, completely ignorant of how fragile that promise really is. Then I folded the photo carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I'm not here to punish you, I said, but I'm also not here to save you. Her lip trembled. Tears came at last. Will you ever forgive me? I stood up. I already did. That's how I let go. She didn't follow me out. She stayed seated, crying quietly over the life she never thought she could lose. I walked to the car, started the engine, and drove home. Home to my children, home to truth, home to clarity. Not revenge, just reset. Because the only real difference between a storm and a new beginning is what and who you choose to rebuild afterward. And I had already started.